Ever get stuck trying to write something down? Like an email or a note, maybe even just a quick thought. And what's in your head just won't come out on the page. Like you wrestle with the words trying to get them just right.
Totally.
Well, what if I told you that this isn't just a grown-up problem,
Oh, yeah,
that kids struggle with this too?
for sure.
Today we're going to dive into something pretty fascinating. How kids learn to do this whole thing,
Yeah.
taking what they know and putting it into writing.
hmm
And it's so much more than just learning how to spell.
Absolutely. And we're going deep on this one, taking a look at a research paper. Written expression as recontextualization. Children write in social time,
Oh, wow.
by Cameron, Hunt, and Linton from way back in 1996.
Okay.
And it gives us a really new way to think about how kids develop their writing skills.
This isn't just for teachers, right?
No, not at all.
I mean, if you've ever thought about how we understand the world and then communicate that to others, especially when we're just starting out,
Right.
well, this is for you. I mean, think about it. When you try to explain something complex to a friend, like in an email, you're not just dumping information, are you?
No.
You're kind of reshaping it so that they can understand. And that's the kind of transformation we're exploring today, how young writers do this.
Exactly. And our mission today is to really unpack this idea of recontextualization.
Okay.
So we want to see how children take their experiences and their knowledge and then show that to somebody else in writing for someone who wasn't there, who doesn't know.
Right.
And here's a key point. This isn't just about showing what they know, but writing actually helps them understand their own knowledge better.
Oh, interesting.
So we'll be looking at different ideas about how writing develops and what research actually tells us about what young writers can really do.
So to start off, this paper looks at some of the existing ideas about how kids learn to write. So what did they want to challenge right away?
Well, right off the bat, they questioned this thing called the deficiency model.
Okay.
The idea that young writers are just missing some key abilities. So things like planning what they want to say and then revising to make it better.
And I guess on the surface, that seems kind of reasonable, right? I mean, you can almost picture a little kid just kind of blurting their thoughts onto the paper without a lot of thought for structure or making it clear.
Yeah, that's what this model says.
Mm-hmm.
But the researchers point to a lot of work that suggests something different. Like, think about process writing research,
Uh-huh.
especially people like Donald Graves.
Okay.
This research gives us examples, from the real world, showing that even really young kids can plan and revise their writing. But it really depends on if they're in a classroom that supports that.
So you've got these two completely opposite views then, right? One saying kids can't plan and revise, and the other showing that they can. How do we understand that?
Well, that's where this recontextualization idea comes in.
Okay.
The authors argue that we need to think differently about what's happening when children write. So we need to see it as a process of taking their thoughts, their experiences, and transforming them so they can be expressed in writing. And this writing has to make sense to someone else.
Right.
It's not just about writing down thoughts. It's about really actively reshaping them for the reader.
Okay, so let's talk about writing as a cognitive process. The paper says that it can actually help kids grow intellectually. How?
Well, writing isn't just some kind of mechanical skill, like learning to tie your shoes.
Right.
It uses a lot of complex thinking skills. Think about all the stuff you have to do when you write. You have to pull up info from your memory. You got to organize your thoughts. You got to pick the right words. You got to make sentences. And then you read it and evaluate what you wrote.
Yeah.
All of that mental work is like a powerful engine for cognitive development.
Mm-hmm.
Think about researchers like David Olson, who argue that actually putting ideas into text can change the way we think.
Right.
And it helps us solidify that knowledge and make it more accessible. Other people, like John Bransford, have said this too.
So it's not just about showing what you know. The writing itself helps you understand things on like a deeper level.
Exactly. Now, when we look at how more experienced writers work, what we call mature writing, there are models, like the ones from Hayes and Flower, that really highlight these cycles, like planning, setting goals, editing, and revising.
Uh-huh.
And these are super important for making good writing. Bereiter and Scardamalia actually call mature writing knowledge transformative,
Okay.
meaning that writing can actually change and deepen your understanding of whatever you're writing about.
Which I totally get. I mean, I feel like I don't really understand what I think about something until I try to write it down.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But the paper brings up a really important point. A lot of this research on how we write has been done on teenagers and adults.
Right.
We don't always know as much about what's going on in the early stages of writing, like
Yeah.
when little kids in elementary school are just learning. I mean, while researchers like Virginia Berninger have added a lot, especially about writing difficulties, detailed long-term studies about how written communication develops right from the start, that's been less common.
Which seems like a pretty big gap, especially when you think about how important writing is in school and in our world today, which is so text-based.
It is. And not knowing enough about early writing has actually caused some debate in the field, especially around knowledge telling. Do you want to explain what that is for our listeners?
Sure. So Bereiter and Scardamalia came up with this knowledge-telling model to describe younger or less experienced writers
Hmm.
and how they approach writing.
Right.
Basically, the idea is that when they write, they don't do a lot of planning ahead of time,
Okay.
and they don't really think about who they're writing for.
Right.
So their writing is pretty straightforward. They just take info from their memory and put it down on paper, whatever order it comes to them.
Mhm.
Stuff like, clear flow or good arguments and revising, they aren't really part of this model.
Yeah, and the research that backs up this knowledge-telling view usually comes from, controlled experiments.
Okay.
So like in a classroom, a kid might get a writing prompt, and then researchers analyze their writing in a really specific way.
But like we said before, there's another view, right? From researchers who look at what happens in classrooms that are really focused on process writing. So what does that tell us about these young writers?
Well, with this one, researchers are actually in the classroom
Mm,
watching the kids' daily writing in settings that really encourage writing as a process.
okay.
So think of people like Donald Graves, Lucy Calkins, and others who really pushed for a more well-rounded way of teaching language arts.
Mm-hmm.
And their work suggests that when these young writers have support and get to pick what they write about and can share with others and get a sense of who they're writing for, they show abilities that are way more advanced,
Oh, wow.
more than what the knowledge-telling model would predict.
Huh?
These researchers see little kids planning their stories, going back and making changes, and even thinking about how their readers will understand what they're saying.
So it sounds like the learning environment is hugely important.
Yeah.
A kid in a super rigid writing situation, like maybe a test, might look like they're just knowledge telling. But in a more encouraging classroom, where there's interaction, they might be way more complex and thoughtful in their writing.
Exactly. And this paper says something super important. These two different ways to study writing, the experiments and the observations, they both give us important pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
The controlled experiments give us standardized data so
Yeah.
we can draw bigger conclusions.
Right.
And watching what happens in the classroom gives us detailed understanding of what young writers can really do when they have the right support.
So the researchers in this paper are saying that when young writers don't make good text, it might not be because they can't think that well, but because they don't have the right kind of support to show what they can do.
That's a big takeaway.
Hmm.
So let's get into this idea of recontextualization.
Yeah.
But first, the paper talks about decontextualization.
Okay.
So what's the difference?
Okay, so decontextualization, like Catherine Snow describes it, is basically taking knowledge and separating it from your own experience.
Right.
Think about a little kid learning the word dog. At first, they might only know it as their pet, Buster.
Uh-huh.
Decontextualization is the process where they start to understand that dog means all kinds of dogs, not just Buster.
Yeah.
Like the neighbor's poodle or a dog in a book. It's a super basic skill for literacy.
Exactly. And written words take that even further,
Mm-hmm.
because they remove the experience from the reader.
Mm,
The reader wasn't there when the writing happened, so they only get the info from the text.
right.
So to read, the reader has to take this info and, build their own understanding of it.
So that's taking stuff out of context. How does recontextualization work then?
Well, recontextualization is about making meaning in writing for someone who isn't there
Hmm.
and wasn't there when it happened. It's not just getting your thoughts out of your head. It's about putting them into a new form that makes sense to somebody else.
Right.
The paper uses ideas from Paul Ricoeur and Courtney Kasdan here, emphasizing that writing creates distance, but we still need to make the meaning clear for the reader.
That makes sense. You have to think about what the reader knows and what they need to know, and then write in a way that connects those two.
Right. And the paper gives a really good example. It's about a toddler in Trafalgar Square
Okay.
who sees a tree, hears singing, and sees nuts being sold.
Okay.
At first, these are just simple words connected to what she sees.
Right.
But later, when she has to write about her family going to Trafalgar Square for Christmas, She has to explain those things for her reader.
Okay.
So the tree becomes a Christmas tree with all the decorations.
Uh-huh.
The singing becomes Christmas carols.
Right.
And the nuts become warm roasted chestnuts sold on the street.
So she's not just using the same words.
Yeah,
She's adding more meaning and description so that the reader who wasn't there can understand.
exactly. And the authors say that writing isn't just a one-way thing.
Okay.
It's not just about taking things out of context. It's about changing things.
Right.
So your ideas affect the words you choose. But then the words, when you write them down and read them, they can change your original thought.
It does a loop.
Exactly.
So what are the main things involved in writing for recontextualization?
The paper says there are three main parts. They're all connected.
Okay.
Knowledge accessing, expression verification, and textual generation.
Mm.
And a big thing to remember is that all of this happens in a supportive environment.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one. What's knowledge accessing?
Knowledge accessing is all the thinking that happens before and during writing.
Okay.
It's about getting the information you want to use.
Hmm.
This includes knowing how to write different types of things, like stories or persuasive arguments.
Uh-huh.
That's called procedural knowledge. And it also includes the actual information you have about the topic. That's called declarative knowledge.
Hmm.
So it's about figuring out what you want to say, both the structure and the content.
And the paper says that thinking about your audience is a really important part of this knowledge accessing.
Yeah.
So how does that fit in?
Well, if you want to do good recontextualization, you got to think about your reader.
Okay.
So that means you got to change how you write,
Hmm.
like how much detail you give, how formal your language is, and what perspective you take, all depending on who you're writing for.
Right.
It's about knowing the topic and knowing how to communicate well with different people.
The paper mentions some research on this, a study by Edmonds, Cameron, and Eglinton. What did they find out about how young children write for different audiences?
That study was really cool. They asked second, fourth, and sixth graders to write letters to convince someone to take a puppy. The trick was the kids had to write to two different people,
Uh-huh.
a kid in the city and a grown-up on a farm. What they found was super interesting. Even the second graders changed what they wrote based on who they were writing to.
Oh, that's surprising, especially when you think about how young kids are thought to be, focused on themselves.
Yeah, the younger kids use more emotional stuff.
Yeah.
Pleading and sympathy, which is probably how they get convinced themselves.
Right.
The older they got, the more they used description and different arguments.
Yeah.
The sixth graders were more likely to use sympathy when they were writing to the adult in the city.
Oh, interesting.
So this really challenges the idea that young kids can't consider someone else's point of view. They might not be as good as older writers, but they're definitely aware of their audience and trying to get their point across.
Okay, that's knowledge accessing. What about expression verification?
Expression verification is all about checking and refining your writing, both while you're writing and after you're done. So this is editing for stuff like spelling and grammar. But it's also revising for meaning, making sure the text flows and says what you meant. It's about checking what you wrote against your goals and what you know about the topic.
So it's not just about commas and stuff, but making sure it actually says what you wanted to say.
Right. And revising is a huge part of this. The paper talks about this study by Edmonds, Cameron, Linton, and Hunt. They had students from 2nd to 5th grade practice editing. And then they asked them to revise texts with errors. Some errors were basic, like typos,
Mm-hmm.
and some were about meaning, where the meaning wasn't clear or it was wrong.
Okay, and what did they find? Could the young kids even spot and fix the errors?
The results were good, actually. They saw a big improvement as the kids went up in grades. By 4th and 5th grade, the students could find and fix like 75% of both kinds of errors. Even the second graders could do about a third. So even young writers can do expression verification.
That's impressive. What about when they're revising their own writing? Is that harder?
It can be.
Right.
The researchers did another study with 5th graders, but this time they asked them to revise their own stories, which had some errors the researchers added.
Huh.
They found that the students were better at fixing the added errors than their own mistakes, but they still fixed a lot of their own errors. And what's really important is that they made very few meaning errors in their first drafts. So they were already trying to make sense in their writing from the start.
So even at a young age, there's this drive to make writing that makes sense.
Totally. And the fact that they could fix errors at all, even if it was easier in someone else's work, means that they're getting better at looking at their own writing objectively.
Okay, so we've got knowledge accessing and expression verification. The third part is textual generation.
Yep.
What's that about?
Textual generation is just the act of writing down your knowledge and your ideas.
Okay.
The paper talks about a study that followed kids for their first 3 years of school. This was a program that focused on literacy. They saw that the kids got much better at writing. The
Mm,
writing got longer, their sentences got more complex, and their writing just flowed better.
right.
This shows how their knowledge and their ability to check their work helps them become better writers.
So they get better at writing, and at the same time, they get better at the actual mechanics of writing, putting the words on the page.
Exactly. But the paper points out that these three parts, knowledge accessing, expression verification, and textual generation, they don't happen separately.
Right.
They're always working together.
Yeah.
And a big thing to understand is that the environment where the writing happens makes a huge difference. And this is where the idea of the Textual Expression Support System, or TESS, comes in.
Tests. That
Yeah.
sounds important. What is that?
The authors came up with TESS as a way to think about the environment that supports writing skills.
Okay.
They compare it to Bruner's idea of LS,
LS.
the Language Acquisition Support System.
Right.
It's about how kids learn to speak. So just like kids need a good environment to learn to talk, they need a supportive TESS to become good writers.
So what does a good test look like? What do you see in a good classroom?
It's about understanding a child's ability to communicate in writing
Uh-huh.
and being responsive to that.
Okay.
So think about things like author's chair,
Right.
where kids share their writing with the class and get feedback,
Yeah.
and regular writing conferences, where teachers can help each student with what they need.
Mm.
Kids need to see good examples of writing too, so they can learn from that.
Okay.
And the classroom needs to be a place where writing is valued and where kids feel safe to try new things, experiment with language, and share their work.
So it's about making an environment where kids feel good about writing and get good feedback.
Exactly. And the key is that this support needs to be at the right level for the child. This is what Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development.
Okay.
So it's about giving kids the right amount of challenge and help to become better writers.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what's the most important thing for our listeners to take away?
I think the biggest thing is that learning to write, even for young kids, is way more complicated than we think.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about handwriting and spelling. It's about taking experiences and knowledge and putting them into writing,
Right.
thinking about their audience, making their writing clear, and expressing themselves well.
Yeah.
This all takes time, and it's really affected by the support they get and the environment they're in.
So it's like we said at the beginning, writing isn't just writing down your thoughts. It's about actively rethinking and reshaping them. And this research really backs that up.
For sure. And it really highlights how powerful writing is. It helps kids explain what they know, but it also helps them understand themselves and the world around them better.
So here's something for you to think about.
Hmm.
What about the learning environments you've been in or that kids you know are in?
Yeah.
How do those environments help or hurt this recontextualization process? And how can we create better tests? Not just in schools, but in how we talk to each other every day.
That's a great question. And if you want to learn more, check out the work of the researchers we've mentioned. Cameron, Bereiter, Scartamalia, Graves, Vygotsky, and there are others. Maybe even take some time to think about your own writing process. How do you access your knowledge? How do you make sure you're expressing yourself clearly? It's all part of this amazing journey of making meaning through writing.
Awesome.